morning, dear children. In the previous class, we started with our history chapter, and the name of the chapter is How, When and Where. Children, as the name suggests, that we have studied about our past, the history of past India. And that's all we discussed also. We studied how the history was divided according to Mill, according to the historians. And we studied the importance of dates too. Then we studied the different social evils which was there in the Indian society. And we also studied that Indian society was divided into parts. The last were the untouchables, and on top were the Brahmins. So that all we studied in our last class. Today we'll continue with the second part of the chapter. And today we are going to study the Britishers in India, the Sepoy Mutiny of the year 1857, and Indian nationalism, and finally how the Indians got the independence. India got the independence and it was divided into two parts, India and Pakistan. So this is all we are going to cover in our today's lesson. So let's roll on to our slides. So children, let's take a quick view as to how James Mill divided the history. In his book, History of British India, he divided history into three periods. He divided history on the basis of religion: Hindu, Muslim and British. But the Indian historians, they divided history on the basis of timeline: ancient history, medieval history and modern history. And then in the modern history, the Britishers, as we all are very much aware, they came to India. And children, we are talking of the time period long back when Jahangir was the Mughal emperor and he ruled our country. And at that time only the Britishers, they arrived in India as a trader. And it was Mughal Emperor Jahangir who gave the permission to East India Company to establish their first factory. And do you know children, the first factory of Britishers, it was set up in the year 1612 at Surat. And then Britishers, they also provided financial support to Indian kings, in some cases for gaining the strategy, for gaining the support of the Mughals. And the company, the East India Company, they gained the favor of the king of Vijayanagar. And then slowly they started setting up more and more factories. And in the year 1640, second factory was set up at Madras, and third factory was set up at 1660 at Kolkata. So slowly they started, the company, the East India Company started setting up their factories, and they set up 3 factories. And along with East India Company, there were some other foreign powers also children. These were the places: Surat, Mumbai, Chennai, Kolkata, where the East India Company settled, established their factories. Then children, along with East India Company, there were some other foreign powers like Dutch,
French, Portuguese, who also came to India, not to establish control over India and Indians, but just as a traders. So we were talking about the Britishers, who gave these foreign powers permission to maintain an army. So children, as we have seen that the Britishers, they came to India, they established their East India Company, then they settled, then they established their 3 factories. That was not all enough. They maintained their army also. But who gave them these powers, these foreign powers, permission to maintain an army? It was just the Mughal Sultan, the Mughal emperors, and were happy. Why did they give the permission? Because they were quite happy with the expensive gifts and the monetary support given to them by the Britishers. And in the beginning, the East India Company got the permission from the Mughal emperor to have security guards to protect them from the other colonial powers like French, Dutch, Portuguese. And then East India Company started the game of power and dominance. How? Because year by year they were settling in India and gaining more and more power. And then ironically, in the British Army, children, more than 90% of soldiers were native Indians and only 90% natives were Indians only. And then in the year 1612, there was a battle known as Battle of Swali. And children, it was a naval battle, and this battle was between British and Portuguese, and finally the Britishers won and they got more power. And then the French, the Portuguese, their main motto was just to trade with India. But the Britishers, they not only wanted to drain Indian resources, but they wanted to establish their rule over India. They wanted their dominance over Indians. And then, as the Mughals were rising to power with the help of the Britishers, simultaneously the Marathas and even Sikh Empire was gaining power. And then they attacked the Marathas and the Sikh Empire. They attacked the Mughals and weakened the power of Mughals. And children, they took 3 Anglo-Maratha wars, which was known as the battle. The first battle was from 1775 to 1782, and Marathas, they got the victory. Second battle was between 1803 to 1805, and here the Britishers, they got victory over Maratha Empire. The third battle was in the year 1817 to 1880, and here also British got the victory, and that was the end of the Maratha Empire. And British East India Company again took control over India. And children, these, as you can see in the picture, these are the Indian rebels, the Sepoy Mutiny. Do you remember the date you have studied in the previous class? In which year we have this Sepoy Mutiny, children? Yes, it was in the year 1857. And do you know what other name was given to it? It was given the name as the First War of Independence, which took place in the year 1857, and these were the areas affected by the Sepoy Mutiny of 1857. Children, these are few notes, that is the past versus the present state of history. Earlier, as I have explained you in the previous class, history was associated with string of dates, and this was because history used to keep a track of battles and big events. But now, history is a wider concept which includes how and what, which means that it is not only associated with the dates, it is associated with why the events have taken place, what are the reasons and how did it took place and how did it ended. Everything about how and what. Then what were the criteria to select a set of dates? Dates become important, children, when we assume that a particular set of events are important. When we want to remember a series of events that had all taken place in past, at that time the dates become quite important. Like most of the history in India was written by British historians, and these historians, they started writing with the rule of first Governor General Warren Hastings, and then ended with the last Viceroy Lord Mountbatten. Children, this is the Governor General of the Bengal, this first Governor General of Bengal, and this is first Governor General of India. Children, these dates, the name of these Governor Generals and Viceroys, they are very important, and most of the time they are asked in the exam. So do keep a record and try to memorize these Governor Generals in the chronological order. Then further talking about East India Company. English Company formed for the exploitation of trade with East and Southeast Asia and incorporated by Royal Charter on December 31st, 1600. Children, these are the few notes, the few things about East India Company. You can read it from the slide or either you can read it from the book. Now, after the Sepoy Mutiny of 1857, in 1858, Queen Victoria became the Empress of India, and she was crowned and she took control over India, and the whole administration was under her hands only. And then the modern period changed to colonial times. Modern period is related to growth of all the forces of modernism. But under the British rule, people were not getting modernized. Therefore, the name changed to colonial period. Now, these are the few definitions, the important terms which we have used and which we will be using further. The meaning of imperialism. It means extending a nation's influence directly or indirectly over weaker areas. Colonialism. Taking direct control of an area and turning it into a colony under a nation's authority. Then children, nationalism. I hope all of you know the meaning of this term. It means belief that an ethnic group should rule itself, and the belief that one nation is better than all the others. And children, first main point about the Britishers. The British Empire was not at all interested in providing education to Indians, and the literacy rate was below 20. But they found that the need of the hour is that the Indians should also be included in their empire, not to give them importance, but for their own selfish motive. So they started educating few Indians, and that's how the literacy reached reached to nearby 20%. And the second main motive of British Empire was they introduced railways in India, not to improve or increase the means of transportation, but again their selfish motive. What was their motive? Their motive was to drain India out of its resources. Whatever resources India has, they wanted to take all those things in their native countries to fulfill the demands of the people in their nation, in their countries. And third main motive was they destroyed our textile industry. Textile industry which flourished long back in the ancient period in India. They destroyed that industry. But children, the few good things also they did while they were ruling our country. They brought social changes and in the country, and they found that the sanitary conditions in India was very poor. So they improved the sanitary conditions, the population growth, urbanization, then English education, and they also gave education to middle class, and in this way there was a growth in educated middle class people. Then came the feeling of Indian nationalism, and Gandhiji was on its topmost position, working harder and harder day by day. So fueled by educated middle and upper classes, Indian National Congress with the help of Jawaharlal Nehru was formed in the year 1885, and they demanded independence, Swaraj in India. But Britishers, they granted limited self-governance to some areas. And this is a famous saying by Gandhiji. He said, "Strength does not come from physical capacity. It comes from an indomitable will," which he meant that through physical capacity, through war, through fights, through strikes, strength doesn't come from those things. It comes from within a person, from his inner self, from the inner will of the person. And then he started with his hard work. So finally in the year March 1930, he started with his Satyagraha movement. He started a Dandi march, and this march he started in order to abolish the salt law. And this Dandi march he started from the Sabarmati ashram and travelled through all these places, and finally he reached to Dandi, and there he broke salt law. Children, you might be thinking why he was behind salt. So it's a common thing. Salt is used by the people of every class, rich, poor, middle, and it is the basic necessity of the people. So he took this salt issue, and this is the famous quotes by Gandhiji. You can go through it, children. And this, did you recognize this person? It is Lord Mountbatten, and this is an agreement, the plan which was signed, Mountbatten plan, which was signed between Jawaharlal Nehru and Mountbatten, and he agreed to give the dominion status. He agreed to give independence to India. And in this slide you can see the Britishers flag, it's coming down, and Indian flag, it's scrolling up. But the Muslim League came in between this plan. Muhammad Ali Jinnah, he demanded separate nation. He wanted to have two separate nations, one for Hindu and the other for Muslims. And finally, the Indian nation was divided into two, and these are the poor people. After the division, they were traveling, going to Pakistan, and this you can see the plight of the people, the condition of the people, how they were forced to travel either to this country or to that country. And this is the map of India, the disputed area of India, Pakistan, and how India was divided into India and Pakistan. And children, relating all these issues with the current issues, when the abrogation of Article 370 took place, Jammu and Kashmir was divided into two union territories, that is Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir and Union Territory of Ladakh. As you can see, children, every day in the news headlines we see POK, Gilgit-Baltistan, this is Pakistan occupied Kashmir. This is just now we have studied the Union Territory of Ladakh, and here the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. And children, this is LAC, line of actual control. Every day we see these terms in the news headlines. So that is all, children. You revise it, go through the chapter, go through both the periods which we have studied, and try to understand and revise it. That's all for today. Have a good day.